What would you do if your wife, with whom you've been for a long time, cheats on you and right after that, you end up living with two beautiful girls who really care about you? That's exactly what happened to our protagonist named Kaya Mitsujiko, who was just betrayed by his wife, the woman he dated years ago, someone very popular with everyone. But despite all the time they spent together, she clearly didn't care. And the worst part? When he caught her cheating, she turned the tables and blamed him, calling him ridiculous. That made Mitsujiko stop and think, leaving him completely heartbroken. He lets out a deep sigh while telling himself he feels like eating out today, so he puts on his jacket again and leaves his house thinking about what luxurious meal he could try. But as soon as he steps outside, he finds a high school girl sitting on the floor. When she sees him, she turns around with a blushed face and tears in her eyes, freezing Mitsujiko on the spot. He can only wonder why a girl like her is standing right in front of his door. While he stays there motionless without saying a word, the girl gives him a warm smile and tells him he's her teacher, something already strange and confusing for him. Then he hears another voice scolding him for making her older sister cry. As he turns around, he gets another surprise. Behind him stands another high school girl with blonde hair and inappropriate clothing, clearly a gal, staring directly at him with an angry expression. Before continuing to look at her, he turns back to the first girl, remembering how she had been called older sister, and realizing that yes, they were actually sisters, very close ones. The blonde one hugs her sister, calming her down and telling her not to cry, creating a scene with two gorgeous girls. As for Mitsujiko, beyond focusing on that, he remains confused because he doesn't understand why two girls are standing in front of his house. Not just any girls, but both incredibly beautiful. An energetic blonde gal and a shy, long-haired, black-haired girl. Before he can even say anything, he remembers the first one called him teacher. Meanwhile, seeing his confused expression, the blonde says they forgot to mention why they came, leaning closer and asking if they can live with him. She then lets out a flirty laugh and blushes, whispering in a sexy voice that in return, they'll give him something. They'll let him do absolutely anything naughty he wants with their bodies, and they won't complain. This shocks Mitsujiko completely, making the blonde repeat herself when she notices his reaction, telling him that if he lets them stay, he can do whatever he wants with them. Coming back to reality, he tells her he hurt her and asks her to stop joking, which angers the girl. She insists she's serious, and he replies that makes it worse because he has no such intentions, asking them to leave. But when he was so firm in this decision, he feels something on his arm, the hands of the quiet girl who hadn't spoken lately. Looking him straight in the eyes, she pleads with him, saying they have nowhere else to go. The blonde gal, seeing that even her shy sister is trying, calls the protagonist Okurim and asks if he doesn't remember them. The same goes for the timid girl, who once again calls him teacher. These words echo in Mitsujiko's mind, where he suddenly remembers it had been a long time since anyone called him Professor Okurin. An image of two little girls doing just that flashes through his mind, making him open his eyes wide in surprise seconds later. Because finally he remembered. Looking at the girls closely, he asks if they were his students from the school where he worked part-time, something that brings smiles to both of their faces as they nod yes. Our protagonist, looking at them again, says he couldn't recognize them because he always pictured them as twins in his mind. But despite that, their personalities haven't changed at all. He calls the blonde gal Akari and the shy girl Nanako, asking if he got their names right. As soon as he says them, Nanako approaches with a big smile, hugs him tightly, and tells him how happy she is that he remembered them after so many years. Smiling slightly, he tells them they've definitely grown a lot since the last time he saw them. And just as he says that, Akari suddenly appears behind her older sister Nakano, grabbing her chest and telling the protagonist he's right, she has amazing magumbos, embarrassing her. Then Akari emphasizes her own figure, telling the protagonist that hers aren't as big as Nakano's, but still pretty good in size. She asks him to remember their measurements, and Mitsujiko, showing no reaction, simply tells her she's still exactly the same, causing Akari to burst into laughter and telling people never change, and she didn't either, just like her sister. Mitsujiko lets out a slight sigh, thinking that although their appearances changed a lot, their personalities stayed exactly the same. After the conversation they had outside, Mitsujiko invites them in to ask how they found out where he lived. Akari proudly says not to underestimate her detective skills. However, Nakano says it was because she remembered, which confuses the protagonist. He asks what she means by remember, making Nakano visibly nervous, stuttering like she doesn't want to explain. But her younger sister Akari tells the protagonist that after he worked, they used to play detective and secretly follow him around. That's how they know where he lives now. Something that surprises Mitsujiko, who thinks to himself this sounds like a crime. Kano also acknowledges that apologizing and saying she didn't mean it like that because she knows it was wrong. But teasing her shyness, she adds that she shouldn't act dumb when she was the most excited about finding out where the protagonist lived, creating a fun atmosphere between them that when seen by our protagonist makes him think it's just like the old days and that nothing has changed even after 10 years have passed, tears starting to stream from his eyes and causing Akari to feel confused. She asks what's wrong, and he tells her he doesn't exactly know. Maybe it's just nostalgia. Both sisters, Akari and Nakano, keep watching the reaction of our protagonist who, despite having a smile on his face, can't stop shedding tears. Mitsujiko, after this moment where he let out all his emotions, wipes away his tears and apologizes for acting like that right when they were reuniting, then offering them something of soda to drink. But as he was handing the glass to Nakano, she accidentally touches his hand, making her extremely nervous and causing her to drop the drink. Her sister Akari helps her up and says not to worry because the glass didn't break, asking how she's doing. Nakano points at her skirt and says she spilled the drink, but luckily only her skirt got stained, which relieves Akari. Remembering what had just happened, Akari leans in close to Nakano with a low and flirtatious voice, teasing her by saying she noticed that the moment she touched Mitsujiko's hand, our protagonist overreacted like a love-struck girl, embarrassing her even though her cheeks are still blushing. Nakano approaches our protagonist and with a trembling voice apologizes, to which he calmly places his hand on her head and gently strokes it, telling her it's okay and to just be more careful next time, calming her down. But at that moment, our protagonist realizes he just did something without thinking, pulling back and apologizing. Nakano is surprised too, but not upset, and tells him it's fine before letting out a deep sigh and smiling while telling him she felt relieved the moment he touched her. Akari gets up from her seat and asks Mitsujiko if she can use his shower, to which he agrees, making her happy. She also calls Nakano so they can go together and take a bath. Then, right before entering the bathroom, with the playful tone she always uses, she invites our protagonist to join them in the shower. He reacts nervously, telling her to stop talking nonsense, to which she replies not to be such a bore and to come in because there'll be plenty of fun. But faced with that, Mitsujiko stops responding as he remembers what had just happened, what Nakano said about feeling relieved, thinking maybe it's because she's with someone she knows. He sits on his couch and lets out a deep sigh while saying that today has been full of events. First, he lost his wife who cheated on him with a coworker, and then a pair of girls suddenly showed up in his room. But in the end, they turned out to be his students from the past. He wonders when was the last time something like this happened, mentioning that it feels like something straight out of a soap opera. But one thing worries him. If he lets them stay, there will be many social risks involved. But despite all that, he thinks it might actually be okay to let them stay, probably because he feels some loneliness after being betrayed by his wife and coworker. But as he was enjoying a peaceful moment of thought, one of the girls suddenly calls him, saying there's a big problem. He turns around worried and is surprised to see both girls standing just inches away wearing towels covering their naked bodies, telling him the real issue is that the washing machine isn't working. Mitsujiko, our protagonist, stays frozen for a moment and starts blushing due to the very stimulating situation, which causes Akari to smile and say that he got caught off guard. Standing beside her, Nakano, also embarrassed, tells him that they really didn't do it on purpose and that the washer is truly broken. Mitsujiko throws some of his clothes toward them for them to wear, and eventually they obey. A little annoyed, Akari asks why he didn't sneak a peek at her and her sister's figures like they do in romantic comedies, which confuses our protagonist. But Akari doesn't stop, telling him not to act dumb and that it's obvious what he should do when he has two gorgeous schoolgirls standing in front of him with no clothes on. Then she points at her older sister Nakano and says she has the biggest chest of anyone and is completely unprotected, so he should really take advantage of that. Something Mitsujiko can't believe he's hearing, so he tells her not to be stupid because he's not into little brats. Tired of arguing, Akari repeats that the washing machine is really broken, something Mitsujiko couldn't believe because he thought they were just joking with him. Looking at him with a mischievous smile, Akari tells him that now they literally have nothing to wear to go home, so they really can't return. That worries our protagonist, who mentions that letting them stay at a man's house is complicated, especially since both are underage. To which, sad and with tears in her eyes, she insists and asks if he really plans to leave them outside. Our protagonist, hearing this, looks at them again and thinks that if he sends them out like this, they could be in real danger of some man taking advantage of them. He then checks the clock and realizes that at this hour, they won't be able to find clothes or a place to stay safely. He turns back to Akari, still trying to refuse letting them stay. But suddenly, Akari walks up with a serious expression and asks Mitsujiko, our protagonist, if he's still a virgin. The moment she says it, Nakano panics and asks her sister what she's talking about. Akari says it's just strange that someone wouldn't make a move when two girls are so vulnerable inside a house alone. Nakano looks at Mitsujiko and apologizes, but he stays silent, lost in his own thoughts, thinking that maybe what Akari said is true. Leaving two girls of marriageable age alone at night really is risky, and there would be more dangers for them than anything else. He concludes that he has no other choice, showing a conflicted face, something that worries Nakano. She stares directly at him, nervous about what might come out of his mouth next, but not wanting to cause any trouble. She calms herself down and apologizes to our protagonist, saying they'll spend the night at a laundromat instead. But before they start getting ready to leave, our protagonist, still deep in thought, tells them they don't have to do that. He'll let them stay at his house. A response neither Akari nor Nakano can believe at first. After a few seconds, their sad faces turn into pure joy. They look at him with shiny eyes and thank him endlessly before hugging each other and whispering that they did it, thanking their luck for being able to stay with our protagonist. Seeing their happy reaction, he lets out a heavy sigh while thinking he doesn't really know why he let them stay. But the words came out on their own after Nakano said they'd go somewhere else in the middle of the night. Akari, excited about how today turned out, jumps in confidently and tells our protagonist she'll cook something for them, adding that her sister Nakano is terrible at cooking, so the best way she can repay the protagonist is by paying him with her body, embarrassing Nakano right in front of Mitsujiko. He simply gives a small smile in response, seeing how both girls are now so happy and playing around together, which was exactly what he wanted, so they wouldn't show those sad faces again when they thought he'd reject them. But he makes it clear, they're only staying for today, or at least that's what he thought. This is how this story begins. One that started tragically for Mitsujiko, but ended with two angels appearing to brighten his day and end it with a smile.